Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Drug companies in America pull in higher profits almost than any other industry in America. And they do that with the help of government-funded research. The federal government has gotten absolutely nothing in return for their work, but all that could change in the near future. Joining me now to talk about that issue are attorneys Joe Cotchett and Mike Berg. Guys, here's the problem. We have sequester in place. We're having to cut the defense budget. We're having to cut the safety net budget. And now we learn that the pharmaceutical industry is taking taxpayer money and making billions personal profit, corporate profit off taxpayer money. Not the first time you've seen that, is it, Joe?
It's not, but everybody on K Street knows it in Washington, D.C. The problem is Main Street doesn't know it.
What's happening, Joe? What is the newest story that's coming out that's so bothersome when you really understand taxpayer money is being taken, being given to a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and then all of a sudden we find out they're making money on the taxpayer money by creating their pharmaceutical product?
Not only that, not dividing it equally, if anything, paying it back. Look, the real concern is very simple. What's going on in the halls of Congress today, and I hate to say this, it involves both parties, and K Street, is that there's a total manipulation of the budgetary process, what dollars go where, and unfortunately, anybody on Main Street, USA, has no clue, it's a sad thing to say, has no clue of the manipulation of taxpayer dollars. So Big Pharma has taken advantage of that. It started right after the war, where we start sharing money with Big Pharma to develop new products to help our people, and we keep getting cut out of the profits that are returns from those drugs. It's not rocket science.
Michael Berg, wasn't there something in place at one time that we had something called a fair pricing clause, that if we said to a pharmaceutical company, look, we're going to give you tax money. We want you to develop this new drug. But you know what? Once you develop it, you have to pass on a savings to taxpayers. Didn't we have that in place at one time?
We did, and it's gone by the wayside. It's gone today, and in fact, when you look at the research of what we've done, as you know, Mike and I, and Joe, we've done these pharmaceutical cases. First of all, they try to say that they spend all this money on R&D, when the truth is, and we know in Pradaxa and other cases, they spend 70 to 80% of all the money on marketing. I've done some research with regard to some of the drugs out there today. Lipitor, consumer price 100 tablets, $272.37. The cost to make the ingredients $5.80. The markup is 4,689%.
That's pretty typical. Joe, let me go back to you on this. In this case, we had an arthritis drug. It's a drug that was developed, first of all, by the government. Let's not miss that. We had the government, Professor John O'Shea worked on this product, developed the product, and then all of a sudden you have the drug company come along and say, gee, we really like this product, and then they say, we're going to make all the profit on it. So what ends up happening is you have a person spending $25,000 a year for this arthritis drug, even though the government paid to develop it, and who's making the profit?
So this year, one of the most significant cases that will affect consumers being argued in the Supreme Court. We're waiting for a decision on it. The bottom line is really very simple. Whether Big Pharma can go out and buy up a generic drug on a phony patent suit, that's where they accused the generic of violating their patent. What they do then is they settle the case. They get together, they settle the case, so they keep the high price of drugs that Mike just talked about. They keep that price up there for many, many more years. You see, we've given the drug companies a monopolistic position where they can go out and get a patent on a drug. So the poor little person that walks into CVS, Walgreens, or whatever it may be, for years is paying that extraordinary profit Mike just mentioned. Today, I don't mean today, this month, and/or this Supreme Court term, they're going to decide whether or not pharmaceuticals can go up and buy out these generics. Now, what's interesting is that public dollars went into the generics as well as Big Pharma in developing these new drugs. So the public is getting hurt both ways.
Michael, let me ask you this. After this arthritis drug was developed, you had the NIH who actually developed it, and you had Dr. O'Shea who actually developed it, declaring victory. Okay, and the next thing we see is we see the company who bought this drug saying, "Oh, gee whiz, we didn't really need your help." Pfizer, who is going to be selling this drug, says, "We didn't really need your help. We spent all the money. We did all the work, and so we should make all the profit." And not only that, Mike, if you think about it, they're saying we're not even going to pass any savings on to the user, the taxpayer who helped pay for this. Is that a pretty typical kind of scenario that you see taking place within the drug industry now?
It is. And as Joe said, what we have is we have the FDA, we have Big Pharma, we have NIH, and we have K Street all together on this, unfortunately. And the Supreme Court now, too, that we're now having the consumers going to pay exorbitant prices with markups of thousands of percent on the back of the taxpayers, and that's a serious problem. I want to just also follow up on what Joe said. Was not only are they buying up the generics with these phony lawsuits, but then they're asking the Supreme Court to say, by the way, when we're a generic and we own them, we get immunity. So if we kill somebody, we hurt somebody, we're never going to be responsible. The whole thing is a sad, sad commentary on what's going on with regard to Big Pharma and the government right now.
Joe, in this situation, although we're talking about arthritis, what the government actually developed for Pfizer, what they actually put on the table for Pfizer, was a drug that had the ability to reverse autoimmune disease, things like Crohn's disease, things like rheumatoid arthritis, any type of autoimmune condition. This is a drug that has the ability to fight back. So what Pfizer understands is the fight is important to them. They're going to take it all of the way because it's not just about arthritis, is it?
Absolutely not. It's more than important to them. It involves billions and billions of dollars that will all be borne by the taxpayer, the consumer that walks into the drugstore. You're absolutely right. Arthritis is just a small aspect of what this drug can do, talking about the one drug. But the picture is much bigger than just the one drug, Mike. The issue is, why is it that Congress stands by, sits by, idly, and does nothing about this? They let the FDA take years and years and years to approve a drug, which is terrible all in itself, but that only helps Big Pharma because it's Big Pharma that has the taxpayer dollars that can do that investigation. So the killing off of these generics, and now the generics, I don't have to say this, the generics are getting in bed with Big Pharma because all they do is now develop a similar drug and then go sell it in the guise of selling a patent right to Big Pharma. That is to say,
in other words, Joe, what ends up happening is they do the numbers. They calculate the numbers. They say if we can keep this drug out there, we're going to make another $4 billion. So they say to the generic folks, it's worth $1 billion just for you to shut up, for you to hush up, and for you to sit on the sidelines while we make our $4 billion, you make $1 billion, you take no risk. It's all easy money. Michael, let me ask you, at this point, we've seen the history of the drug industry in the last 20 years. I think the mainstream media has done a horrible job telling the story about how corrupt this industry is. You work against this industry day after day. Do you see anything changing without government stepping in and saying, you know what, we have to change the game for the drug industry?
No, nothing's going to change, and in fact, unfortunately, they appear to be in collusion with the drug companies, as both Joe and you have talked about. And the $4 billion, we've seen them make $4 billion a year on one drug. That's just the beginning. What we have to do is the Main Street consumer, they got to start saying not only no, but hell no, and they need to write their congressman, and they need to understand what's really going on so that they're not getting ripped off when they go and get these drugs. And not only are they getting ripped off on price, but they're also being put in a position where they could get hurt or die. as a result of these drugs without having any recourse in the court system. They have to start saying no, and they got to start saying it now.
Joe, let me ask you this. Why is it that we don't see mainstream media, traditional media, telling the story about a company like Pfizer or telling the story about a company like Merck? Why can't we see that on the nightly news, that you have Pfizer stealing taxpayers' money to make a profit and not giving back anything in return? Why is that?
Have you ever figured out who owns Main Street media today? Mainstream media. Have you ever figured out, have you ever looked at who owns CBS, ABC? Did we ever think about looking at the hedge funds on Wall Street that are today highly invested in the generics that are selling back these drugs, as we just pointed out? It is Wall Street personified. It is the powers that be that give the political donations to stay away from Big Pharma, and it is the contributions and ownership of mainstream media that keeps this under wraps. I mean, look at, I don't want to get off on Afghanistan and Iraq, but look at when we went in there at the outset. Mainstream media was nowhere to be found with a dissenting voice because of government contractors going in. This is the same thing true of your your Walgreens, your CVS pharmacies. That is $1 billion to Wall Street. So when we're talking about Big Pharma, you understand that this is the machinations of a system that is out of control. A few judges have stood up and said, wait a minute, we're not going to accede to these settlements. We're not going to succeed.
But not many of them have they, Joe?
It's a handful.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. This is an important story. It's a story that needs to be told. Unfortunately, we can't count on mainstream media to tell this story. Thanks for joining me.